She knelt in the cold chapel, just a little girl in an oversized dress, whispering a prayer so pure it stopped a stranger in his tracks. "Dear God, please send my mom someone to take care of her." What she didn't know was that someone was already listening, and he was about to change their lives forever. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and like the video. It truly helps us share more beautiful stories like this. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's jump into the story. The small stone chapel sat at the edge of the village square, its stained glass windows glowing gold against the dark winter sky. Inside, candles flickered along each narrow aisle, and the soft hum of a carol floated from the choir loft. Snow tapped the roof like tiny fingers. Among the last to slip through the heavy wooden door was Emma, a young mother whose shoulders sagged beneath a worn wool coat. Beside her skipped 4-year-old Rosie, cheeks bright from the cold. They found an empty seat near the rear, Emma exhaling, as though placing her burdens on the pew beside. Emma's coat smelled faintly of dish soap from the cafe, where she had worked a double shift that very afternoon. Wisps of brown hair fell loose from the scarf, framing her tired face. She tried to straighten Rosie's second-hand red dress, but the hem still hung uneven. While others in the chapel held crisp programs and wore polished shoes, Emma simply closed her eyes, thankful for a moment of stillness, yet worry pressed on her chest. Rent overdue, heating bill rising, and Christmas morning only hours away with no gift hidden for Rosie. In the back row sat Marcus, a travel-weary entrepreneur passing through the village on what he called a healing journey. Grief had driven him from crowded city streets 2 weeks earlier after the sudden death of his sister, his last close family. He had visited cathedrals and coastlines, searching for silence that might calm the ache. Tonight, he hoped the Christmas Eve service would offer one clear note of peace. Instead, he found himself studying the young mother up front, her gentle touch on her child's shoulder, her effort to smile even while fatigue painted shadows under her eyes. The choir shifted to a quiet verse, and the organ hushed. In that fragile lull, Rosie slid from the pew and knelt on the cold stone floor. She clasped her small hands tight, eyes squeezing shut. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried through the hush. "Dear God, please send my mom a good friend who will look after her. She works so hard and gets lonely." The words, pure and unpolished, rose like smoke toward the wooden rafters. For a breath, even the candles seemed to pause their dance. Marcus felt the plea strike something raw inside him. He imagined his sister, who had been much like this little girl, bold, hopeful, always asking the world for impossible kindnesses. His heartbeat quickened. He tried to swallow the lump forming in his throat, but it remained. He watched Emma's face grow pink as she gently tugged Rosie back onto the bench, murmuring that prayers were best kept quiet. Yet Marcus had already heard every syllable, and each one echoed against the empty rooms of his heart. The choir resumed, voices rising, but Marcus barely noticed, his gaze fixed on Emma and Rosie. When the final hymn began, most worshippers lifted songbooks, their voices filling the vaulted space. Emma instead gathered her coat, a frayed handbag, and Rosie's mittens. She guided her daughter toward the door before the last note faded, perhaps to avoid curious glances. Outside, snow whirled beneath the street lamp like silver dust. Rosie laughed, sticking out her tongue to catch a flake, her giggle drifting back into the chapel aisle. Marcus stood as though pulled by an invisible thread, stepped into the aisle, then stopped, unsure what he meant to do. Approach them. Offer help? His shoes felt glued to the floor. Through the doorway he saw Emma lift Rosie into her arms, the child resting a tired head on her mother's shoulder. They turned left, their figures shrinking against the sweep of white. Marcus reached the door just in time to see their shapes bend around the corner of the square and vanish. He lingered beneath the arch, cold air brushing his face. The snowflakes landed on his coat sleeves, melting instantly. Voices of cheerful family spilled from the chapel behind him. But Marcus heard only the whisper of a little girl asking the night sky to send her mother a friend. He watched the empty street a long moment, shoes sinking into fresh snow. Somewhere beyond the dark, The pair were making their way home to a silent flat, a single lamp, perhaps a table missing one chair. The thought stung. Marcus slid his hands into his pockets, turning the quiet words over and over. Please send my mom a good friend. He did not know the mother's name, nor the child's. Yet their need felt strangely tied to his own longing for meaning after loss. Snow blurred the distant rooftops, and the chapel bells rang midnight. Standing at the threshold between warm candlelight in the frozen square, Marcus made no promise aloud, but something inside him shifted. He stepped back, closed the heavy door, and began to walk following the faint trail of footprints that led into the snow-lit night. Unsure where they would end, yet certain his journey had just begun. The morning after Christmas, Marcus sat by the window of his small rented room, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. Frost clung to the edges of the glass, but his mind was far from the chill. He could still hear the little girl's voice from the night before, soft, steady, and filled with more hope than most adults dared to carry. Her wish had settled deep in his chest, like a stone dropped in water, sending ripples he couldn't ignore. He didn't know Emma or Rosie. Not really. He only knew what he saw and what he felt. But it was enough to stir something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Marcus spent the next few days quietly learning more, not through invasion or spying, but by asking gentle questions. He returned to the chapel and spoke to the groundskeeper, then a kind woman at the bakery who mentioned Emma, the single mom who never asks for anything. He listened, asked no more than necessary, and took mental notes. Soon he had an address, a building name, and a picture forming in his mind. A mother holding her world together, with threadbare patience and silent strength. The apartment was small, old, and cold. Chipped bricks lined the stairwell, and the window frames were painted shut. Marcus stood across the street one evening, watching lights flicker inside. He saw Emma lift Rosie onto her hip, probably heading to bed, her steps slow and tired. That night, Marcus made a call, not to show off or be praised, but to quietly help. He hired a local handyman to inspect the roof on behalf of the property owner. No one questioned it. Within 2 days, the worst leak above apartment 3 CMS was sealed. 2 broken windows were patched with fresh panes. Next came groceries. Nothing flashy, just simple, needed items. Fresh bread, milk, apples, a bag of rice, canned soup, and even a soft scarf for the little one. He had them delivered anonymously. No note, no sender. Mom, just a package at the door. Emma opened it late that evening. She stood still for a moment. Confused, her hand on the doorknob, Rosie peeked around her legs and gasped. Mummy, it's the angel. She squealed, reaching for the milk like it was treasure. Then knelt down, checking the contents with careful hands, her eyes wide with wonder who would leave this. She whispered, I think it's someone from the church, Rosie said proudly, holding up the scarf. The angel heard me. Emma didn't reply. She only smiled a real, unguarded smile and pulled Rosie close. She placed the groceries in their tiny kitchen, then added the scarf to the hook by the door. Rosie danced with it around the living room, humming Christmas songs off dash key. Marcus watched from across the street, hidden behind the wheel of his car. He hadn't meant to come. His plan was to help and walk away. But something about seeing the joy on that little girl's face made it hard to leave. He didn't need thanks. This wasn't charity. It was something else. Days passed, and Marcus continued to help in small ways. He found a local shop owner and paid off a part of Emma's rent through a building maintenance donation. He left another grocery bag the next week, this time with crayons and a small drawing pad tucked in between. Cereal and eggs. He remembered Rosie's crumpled picture from the church pew and figured she'd like something new to create. With Dot, Emma grew more puzzled with each passing act. No one knocked. No one claimed credit. But the help was real, and it arrived just as things were growing hardest. Her hands were cracked from cleaning work, and her feet ached from standing double shifts. Yet somehow, they had enough. Just enough. On a snowy afternoon, Marcus saw something that stayed with him. Emma was walking home with a bag of groceries. When an older man slipped on the ice nearby, he fell hard, his hat flying off. Emma rushed to him without hesitation. She dropped her own bag, knelt beside the man, and helped him to sit. She brushed snow from his coat and checked his hands. "Easy now," she said gently. "You're okay." The man winced and tried to pull out his wallet. "Let me give you something, miss." Emma shook her head with a warm smile. "Just get home safe." She picked up her own groceries and walked away without waiting for praise or reward. Marcus stayed frozen in place, watching. It wasn't just her tired eyes or gentle hands that moved him, it was her grace. Quiet, unseen, and constant later. That week, Marcus dropped off a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a wool blanket, soft and warm. He placed it at the doorstep of apartment 3C and left before the hallway light flickered on. 10 minutes later, Rosie found it. She squealed with joy and ran to show her mom. Emma picked up the blanket, her eyes shining. She turned it over and found a tiny tag that read, "Stay warm. You are not alone." Emma placed the blanket on their couch. She didn't say much, but later that night, after Rosie had gone to bed, she stood by the window and stared out into the snow. For a long time, she didn't move. She simply stood there, holding the tag, as if trying to understand what kindness like this meant. Marcus, seated in his car once again, watched her silhouette. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt something different, like he'd found a story he wasn't finished reading. A life that had brushed against his at the exact moment he'd needed. Reminding of how beautiful, quiet goodness could be. And just like that, he knew he wasn't done. Not yet. Snow had fallen again overnight, wrapping the little village in soft white. Inside a small bookstore near the center square, Emma stood behind the counter, carefully arranging a row of used novels. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where time moved slowly, and customers came in mostly to escape the cold. The warmth inside was a comfort, though Emma's mind felt anything but peaceful. She couldn't stop thinking about the small surprises that had kept appearing over the past 2 weeks: the groceries, the fixed windows, the blanket, the tiny note that had read, "You are not alone." Each act had come without warning or explanation, and while she was grateful, a part of her was uneasy. Who was behind it?
Oh.
And why her? She tried not to dwell on it. There were dishes to wash at the cafe later, and rent due in 10 days. But that day, as she was stacking books, her coworker Nina leaned over with a grin, scrolling through her phone. "Hey, Emma," Nina said, lowering her voice. "You're never going to believe this. Is this the guy you bumped into at the gas station last week?" Emma looked up. "What do you mean?" Nina turned the screen toward her. On it was a photo of a man in a sharp gray coat, standing in front of a tall glass building. The headline read, "Private investor Marcus Rowan returns to hometown for quiet holiday stay." Emma's breath caught. She recognized him immediately. The kind stranger she had spoken to more than once, who had offered to carry her groceries, who had laughed with Rosie at the store, and the man who never mentioned what he did, never said anything about being wealthy or important. "That's him," Emma whispered. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the phone from Nina. Marcus. Suddenly, everything made sense. The groceries, the repairs, the blanket, all of it. It wasn't some anonymous community program, it had been him. And he hadn't said a word. Emma left the bookstore early that day, heart pounding and thoughts spinning. She barely noticed the snow crunching beneath her boots as she walked home. Inside her apartment, Rosie was coloring at the kitchen table, humming softly. She looked up with a bright smile. "Mummy, Mr. Marcus left me a note in my picture book. He said he liked my rainbow drawing." Emma knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, Mr. Marcus's full name is Marcus Rowan. He's a very successful man. He's been helping us." Rosie blinked. "Like, with the milk and the flowers?" Emma nodded. "Yes. I think he's the one who did all of that." Rosie grinned. "I told you he was our angel." Emma tried to smile, but something inside her twisted. Was it kindness or pity? Had he been honest, or had he just enjoyed playing the part of a secret hero that evening? Emma bundled herself in her old coat and walked to the small cafe near the park, the place she had seen Marcus more than once. And there he was, sitting at the corner table with a cup of coffee, looking out at the snow. She approached quietly. He looked up, surprised. "Emma," he said, rising. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Her voice was soft but firm. Marcus hesitated, "Because I didn't want that to be the first thing you knew about me." "But you watched me struggle," she said, eyes narrowing. "You saw how hard things were for me and Rosie. And instead of talking to me like a person, you sent gifts and paid bills like you were solving a problem." He looked down. "I wasn't trying to solve you. I just wanted to help. You didn't give me a chance to say yes or no," she said. "You made the choice for me." Marcus stepped closer, speaking gently. "I didn't do any of this because I saw you as weak, Emma. I did it because you're strong. I've seen how you care for people, how you keep going, even when you're worn thin. I wanted to help because I respect you." Her shoulders sank. The fire in her voice flickered. "You don't understand," she whispered. "When people help me, I start to hope. And then when they leave, it hurts even more." Before Marcus could answer, a small voice interrupted them. "Are you mad at Mummy?" They both turned. Rosie stood a few steps away, her scarf trailing. Behind her, teddy bear in one hand. Marcus knelt down beside her, his voice gentle. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad. 'Cause Mummy gets scared when people leave," Rosie said quietly. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. Marcus looked up at her, then back at Rosie. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not if you want me to stay." Rosie nodded, hugged her bear tighter, and took her mom's hand. "He's not a bad angel," she whispered. "It's just a quiet one." Emma didn't speak as she walked Rosie home. Marcus didn't follow, stood in the falling snow, heart heavy, not knowing if he had ruined everything or somehow made room for something better. Later that night, as the village lights flickered under the snowy sky, Emma sat alone by the window. She thought about everything about the man who had stepped into her life like a whisper. The child who had believed in angels, the strange warmth growing in her chest despite her fear. Maybe this wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was. The middle of something new. The new year arrived with soft snow and a quiet hush across the village. Rooftops were covered in white, and the streets sparkled under pale morning light. It was a peaceful day, one of those rare moments when time seemed to pause. Inside her small apartment, Emma was tying Rosie's boots while the little girl bounced. With excitement, "Where are we going?" Rosie asked, her cheeks already pink with joy. Emma smiled. Marcus said it's a surprise. They stepped outside, bundled in scarves and gloves. Marcus was waiting at the end of the street, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. He smiled when he saw them, his breath visible in the cold air. "Good morning," he said gently, offering the box to Emma. "What's this?" she asked. "Just something for Rosie," he said. "New Year's gift." Rosie took the box with wide eyes. She opened it slowly, unwrapping a soft lavender scarf with tiny silver stars stitched along the edge. "It's beautiful," she gasped, wrapping it around her neck. "Thank you." "You're welcome, little star," Marcus said. Emma looked at him, her expression softer than it had been in days. "You put stars on it? She shines like one," he replied simply. They walked together, not saying much, just letting the snow crunch beneath their feet. Marcus led them to the old chapel, the same place they'd all been on Christmas Eve. "You said we were going to the park," Emma said, a small laugh in her voice. "We'll go after Marcus," replied. "Just come inside first." Rosie tugged her mother's hand. "Come on, Mommy. It's a surprise." Emma raised an eyebrow but followed them in. Duh. The chapel was nearly empty, candles still flickering gently near the altar. It looked just as it had that night quiet, still, and full of something unspoken at the front. Resting on the same wooden bench where Rosie had once knelt was a small bouquet of white lilies. Emma froze when she saw them. "Do you remember this place?" Marcus asked Rosie. Rosie nodded. It's where I asked God for Mummy to have a friend." Marcus knelt in front of her, his voice low and steady. "You didn't ask for toys. Asked for someone to look after your mom. That night changed my life." Rosie looked up at him, eyes wide, Really? Yes, he whispered. Because in that moment, I knew I wanted to be part of your life. Not just for a while. For always. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket and held it gently. Rosie, he said, may I be your dad? Not just today, but for pancakes and bedtime stories, for snow days and school plays. For every day you'll have me, Rosie shrieked with joy and threw her arms around his neck. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Emma covered her mouth with her hands. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall yet. She wasn't ready for that moment to end. Then Marcus turned to her. He stayed on one knee, eyes never leaving hers. Emma, he said, his voice trembling, that night I came to this chapel, broken. I had lost someone I loved, and I was searching for peace. What I found was you. The way you held your daughter. The way you carried your pain with such quiet strength reminded me of the best parts of the world. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, and full of meaning. I don't want to save you, he continued. You never needed saving. I just want to stand beside you, to walk this life with you. Not because of what we've both lost, but because of what we can build together. Emma didn't speak right away. She knelt beside him, her hand reaching out to touch his cheek. I've been afraid, she whispered. Afraid to trust again, afraid to hope. Me too, he said. But maybe, she said, her voice breaking, maybe it's time to stop being afraid. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, Marcus. Yes to all of it. Rosie squealed and wrapped her arms around both of them. The chapel bells began to ring as the three of them stood, holding one another. The snow falling gently outside. Weeks passed, and the little family settled into a new rhythm. Marcus found a small house on the edge of the village with a big backyard and a fireplace that crackled every evening. Rosie had her own room now, filled with stars on the ceiling and shelves of picture books. Emma found joy in the quiet cooking dinner, while Marcus helped with homework, walking hand in hand through the town square, laughing at things she once would have cried over. And on one special morning, they returned to the chapel, just the three of them. Rosie knelt again, just like before, but this time with a smile on her face. Thank you, God, she whispered. I got my wish. I got my daddy for Christmas. Emma stood behind her, Marcus beside her, their hands joined, and as the snow fell, once more over the chapel roof, they didn't feel alone anymore. They were a family now born not of perfection, but of love, faith, and one little girl's whispered wish that changed everything.